Welcome to Life Stories, where we share unforgettable tales of love, empathy, and personal transformation. Today's story is about Sarah, a woman who finds herself caught between family expectations and the pure love she discovers in the most unexpected person, a homeless man who hides a life-changing secret. Join us as we take you through Sarah's journey of kindness, self-discovery, and the power of true love. It's a story about looking beyond appearances, embracing compassion, and realizing that sometimes, the best things in life come when you least expect them. Don't forget to subscribe to start today's story. The sun was setting slowly on that busy afternoon as I walked home with Rachel, my younger sister. We had just finished a long trip to the local market, carrying bags laden with fresh produce and household essentials. The streets were still bustling, filled with the lively chatter of children laughing and running, and traders calling out to potential customers. Everything felt vibrant and alive in that moment, and the warm breeze of the late afternoon air was a comfort after the long walk. As we made our way down the familiar street that led to our home, I suddenly stopped in my tracks, my eyes falling on something, or rather, someone, out of place. Sitting with his back against a brick wall was a man I hadn't noticed before. His clothes were worn and ragged, his hair unkempt, and there was a sort of desolate aura around him. But there was something different about him. He didn't stretch out his hand or call for help as most beggars did. Instead, he sat quietly, gazing at the ground with an expression that seemed deep in thought, as though he was lost in his own world. I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. Rachel, ever the practical one, turned to look at me as I paused. "Why did you stop?" she asked, a hint of confusion in her voice. She wasn't one for these moments of empathy, always skeptical of people like him. I didn't answer immediately. My eyes remained fixed on the man, trying to understand what it was about him that made my heart ache. There was something about him that felt different. He wasn't asking for help, and yet there was an undeniable sadness in the way he sat, as if life had dealt him a blow too deep to recover from. "Look at him, Rachel," I finally said, my voice softer than usual. "Doesn't he look different from the others? He looks so lost." Rachel folded her arms and raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Different? He's just another beggar, Sarah. They all look the same." But I couldn't shake the feeling. "No, there's something in his eyes. He's not like the others. He just looks sad, like he doesn't know where to turn next." Rachel sighed, clearly annoyed by my insistence. "So what? You're going to bring him home and feed him now? He's just a beggar. Why do you even care?" Ignoring her sarcasm, I reached into my purse and pulled out a few bills. I didn't even think twice about it. As I bent down to place the money beside him, the man's eyes snapped up to meet mine. His expression was one of surprise, as if he didn't expect anyone to notice him. For a moment, he stared at me, trying to understand why I was doing this. "Thank you," he said in a soft, gravelly voice that made my heart swell with empathy. His eyes were wide with gratitude, but there was a hint of confusion there too, as though he couldn't believe someone was offering him kindness without any strings attached. I smiled warmly. "Please, take it, get something to eat," I said gently, standing back up and taking a small step away. Rachel rolled her eyes, clearly done with the whole situation. "Here we go again," she muttered. "You can't save everyone, Sarah. You really think helping one beggar will change anything?" I turned to her, not allowing her words to bother me. "If I can help one person, that's enough." But Rachel wasn't finished. She scoffed and tossed her hair back dramatically. "You always think like this, acting like you're living in some fairy tale. In real life, you need to think about yourself first. Not everyone deserves your help." I didn't reply. Instead, I just gave her a small, knowing smile and began walking again, feeling a sense of peace settle in my heart. Something about helping that man felt right, even if Rachel didn't understand. As we got closer to home, Rachel sighed dramatically, breaking the silence. "I hope you're ready for Mom's lecture. You know how she hates things like this." I glanced at her, a slight frown tugging at my lips. I didn't need to hear it. I knew what was coming. The way our mother, Mrs. Williams viewed me was nothing like the way she saw Rachel. I had always been the problem child, the one who didn't quite fit in. But Rachel? She could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. When we walked through the door, I could already feel the tension in the air. Rachel, with her usual flair for drama, wasted no time. "Mom, can you believe what Sarah did today?" she exclaimed, dropping her shopping bag on the table and looking for an audience. Mrs. Williams, sitting on the couch and sipping her tea, looked up with a frown. "What is it now, Rachel?" "Sarah decided to give money to a beggar on the street. Just like that," Rachel continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "She bent down and placed money next to him, like she was his personal angel." I sighed quietly, already bracing myself for the inevitable. Mrs. Williams turned her gaze sharply to me, her face hardening. "Sarah, is this true?" I nodded, already expecting the reaction. "Yes, Mom, I gave him some money. He looked hungry, and I just wanted to help." Mrs. Williams shook her head in frustration, her voice sharp. "How many times have I told you? You can't go around wasting money on people you don't know. Especially not on beggars. Just because we live in a big house doesn't mean we should act foolishly. Your father's gone, and I'm the one holding this family together now. We have to be careful." I stood my ground, my voice calm. "I didn't waste it, Mom. I helped someone who needed it." Rachel scoffed again. "Oh please, Sarah, don't start with your charity talk again. Helping one beggar won't change the world." Tyler, who had been quietly listening from the couch, leaned back with a smirk. "Honestly, Sarah, you might as well marry the guy since you care so much about him." Rachel burst into laughter, clearly pleased with herself. "Exactly, Mrs. Beggar's wife. Maybe he'll give you the crown of poverty." I said nothing, used to their teasing. It wasn't the first time I'd been made the butt of their jokes. Instead, I simply picked up my bag and headed for my room, the familiar sting of rejection echoing in my chest. But even as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel that something had changed. That one small act of kindness had already planted a seed inside me. And no amount of sarcasm or ridicule could take it away. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about Ben, the way he had looked at me, the gratitude in his eyes, and I knew, deep down, that I had made the right choice. I didn't know why, but something about him had touched me in a way I couldn't explain. Something in my heart told me I hadn't just helped him. I had begun something bigger than I had ever imagined. Days passed after the encounter with Ben. Every time I walked home from work, I found myself looking for him, hoping I would catch a glimpse of him again. Sometimes I brought food or a bottle of water with me, other times just a little bit of change, wondering if he was still hungry or cold. We didn't speak much at first, just a few polite exchanges. A smile, and a "thank you," here and there. But there was an unspoken understanding between us. Each time I saw him, I felt a little more connected to him, and something in his eyes seemed to soften whenever he looked at me. It wasn't until one evening, when I was returning home after a long day at the bank, that I saw him again. This time, he was walking down the street, his pace slow, his feet dragging against the pavement. I couldn't help but notice the exhaustion written all over him. His clothes were even more worn out than I remembered, and there was a weariness in the way he carried himself that tugged at my heart. Without thinking, I quickened my pace to catch up with him. "Ben?" I called gently, hesitant at first, unsure if he would even remember me. He stopped, his shoulders tensing for a moment before he turned toward me. His eyes met mine, wide with surprise. "Oh, it's you," he said with a soft, tired smile. "I didn't expect to see you again. I was worried about you," I confessed, catching my breath as I walked alongside him. "You don't look well. Where are you going? Do you need some help?" Ben sighed deeply, rubbing his eyes as though he hadn't slept in days. "I'm trying to get to the other side of town," he explained, "but I don't have money for the bus. So I've been walking. It's a long way, but I don't have much of a choice." Without even thinking, I reached into my purse and pulled out some money. "Here, take this for the bus," I said, pressing the bills into his hand. I wasn't sure why, But I felt like I couldn't just leave him there to suffer. Ben looked at the money in his hand. Then back at me. His expression was full of gratitude. But also something more, perhaps disbelief. I can't take this from you again, he said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. You've already helped me so much. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. I shook my head, not allowing him to refuse. It's not a big deal, I said gently. I just want to help. Please, take it. For a long moment, Ben stood there, staring at me. Then, finally, he sighed and accepted the money, his eyes softening. Thank you, Sarah. You don't know how much this means to me. You don't have to thank me, I replied, giving him a small smile. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. He nodded, his smile becoming a little more genuine. I'll try. We exchanged a few more words. And as I watched him walk away toward the bus stop, I couldn't shake the feeling that something between us was changing. There was a bond forming. Something deeper than just acts of charity. I felt a connection to him. Something that went beyond helping a stranger. Maybe it was because he didn't ask for anything. He never begged or demanded. It was as if he had come to terms with his life in a way that made me admire him more than I could explain. The next few weeks were filled with quiet moments shared between us. I would bring him meals sometimes, simple things like sandwiches or fruit, just to make sure he had enough to eat. And sometimes, we'd sit together in silence, or talk about our lives. I learned about his past, the struggles he had faced in life. He had grown up in an orphanage after losing both of his parents at a young age. Life had never been easy for him. He worked odd jobs wherever he could. But it was always temporary. Never enough to build a stable life. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke about his childhood. But there was a quiet dignity in him that moved me. He wasn't someone who wallowed in self-pity. Even though his life had been nothing short of a struggle, I felt a deep empathy for him that went beyond just charity. I wanted to do more. But I didn't know what more I could give. You don't deserve this life, I told him one evening, after he finished telling me about the latest hardship he'd faced. Ben looked at me with a soft smile, a mixture of sadness and understanding in his eyes. Life doesn't always give us what we deserve, he said quietly. In that moment, I knew there was something profound about him. Something I hadn't expected to find. I wasn't just helping him out of pity anymore. I was invested in him as a person. In his hopes, his dreams, and the quiet strength that kept him going despite everything. As time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was growing between us. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but there was an undeniable connection. Something deeper than I had ever experienced with anyone before. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew that Ben, the man who had once seemed like nothing more than a beggar on the street, had become someone I couldn't ignore. Someone I couldn't stop caring for. I had known for a while that the relationship I had with Ben was different. It wasn't like anything I had experienced before. There was a quiet understanding between us. An unspoken connection that ran deeper than words. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, our hopes, our dreams, our lives, and the things that had shaped us. And with every conversation, I felt myself falling for him more. The kindness he had shown me, the way he treated me with respect when no one else had, was something I had never experienced before. Yet, I knew my family wouldn't understand. Rachel, with her sharp tongue and desire for status, would never accept Ben. She only cared about appearances, about marrying into wealth and social power. And my mother, Mrs. Williams, well, she had always been more concerned with what was proper. Her obsession with status was something I had grown accustomed to. It didn't matter what I did or how I felt. Everything I did was scrutinized, criticized, and dismissed, especially if it didn't fit into the neat, comfortable narrative she had built for herself and for us. It wasn't until the day Ben revealed who he truly was that everything changed. We had been walking through the park, as we often did, when he stopped me. His eyes, usually soft and kind, were filled with something I couldn't quite place. He took my hands in his grip firm but gentle. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. Something important. I looked at him, confused. What is it? You're scaring me. Ben took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine. I haven't been completely honest with you, he said slowly. My full name is Benjamin Harrison. I am the heir to Harrison Industries, one of the largest companies in the country. I blinked, my heart racing as the words sank in. Wait, what? You're Ben Harrison? He nodded, his gaze steady. Yes, I am. The man you've been helping on the streets. The one you've shown kindness to. He's not the real me. I've been living in disguise. I stood there, stunned. I didn't know what to say. Ben, the man I had grown to care for, had been living as a homeless person on purpose, to see if someone would care for him without knowing who he really was. The man I had been supporting, the man I had trusted, was someone far beyond anything I had imagined. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do that? Why hide who you are? Ben looked at me, his eyes softening. I've had enough of people only caring about my wealth. I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I truly am. Not for my money, my name, or my family's legacy. And when I met you, Sarah, I knew I had found that person. A wave of emotions hit me, surprise, disbelief, awe. It was like everything had shifted in an instant. The man I had been helping, the man I had been growing closer to, was someone who could change my life forever. I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was so much bigger than I had ever imagined. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Ben explained everything, the pressure he had been under, his decision to live anonymously, and how he had found something real in me. I was overwhelmed but also strangely comforted. He wasn't just some rich heir trying to get attention. He had done this because he wanted to see if love could be real. If it could be something more than the shallow relationships he had encountered. Before I knew it, Ben proposed. It wasn't grand or extravagant, just a simple, quiet moment, in the same park where we had shared so many conversations. But it felt like everything had led up to this moment. The love I had felt for him had grown so deep, so pure, that I didn't hesitate to say yes. The moment I agreed, everything changed. News spread quickly, and soon I found myself caught in a whirlwind of preparations for a wedding I never expected. Invitations were sent out, and the media picked up on the story of the heir to Harrison Industries marrying a simple girl who had once given him money on the streets. At first, I was nervous about my family's reaction. Rachel would be furious, and I wasn't sure how my mother would take it. She had always pushed Rachel toward wealth, toward marrying into a powerful family. And now I was doing the opposite. Marrying a man who had once lived as a beggar. The day of the wedding finally arrived. As I stood in front of the mirror, wearing the most beautiful gown I had ever seen, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The doubts that had plagued me melted away. I wasn't just marrying into wealth. I wasn't just following the path that my family had chosen for me. I was marrying Ben because I loved him. Because he had shown me what real love was. When I stepped out of the car, the crowd's eyes were on me. But it wasn't their gazes I felt. It was the warmth of Ben's eyes. The love that radiated from him as he stood at the altar, waiting for me. And as I walked toward him, everything faded away. In the back of the church, I could see Rachel and Mrs. Williams, sitting in their seats, their faces a mixture of shock and regret. It was too late for them. They had missed their chance to love me for who I was. And as I walked toward Ben, the man who had shown me what love truly was, I realized that I had finally found where I belonged. As the ceremony unfolded, I felt like I was floating in a dream. The vows we exchanged were not just promises, but affirmations of everything we had been through together. The quiet moments, the small acts of kindness, and the love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. I had found a partner who didn't just love me for who I appeared to be, but for who I truly was, flaws and all. When the reception started, the atmosphere was electric. Guests from all over the world gathered to celebrate not just the joining of two people, but the merging of hearts and souls. My heart swelled with gratitude, knowing that I was standing by the side of a man who saw the world with compassion, who valued love above all else. As we danced, I glanced at Rachel and Mrs. Williams. There were no words of regret that could undo the years of distance between us. The truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. I had learned to love myself in a way that I had never done before. I had embraced my worth. Not based on anyone else's standards, but on my own. Ben and I walked toward our future. Hand in hand. The life we were beginning together was far from perfect. But it was real, and that was enough. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more life-changing stories like this.